In this episode, I talk with a good friend who made a pretty significant career pivot in his life. And so we are going to discuss that, how he did it, why he did it, some of the advice that he shares with other people who are interested. And then we're going to talk about how he's beginning to diversify his revenue streams as he's spinning up a side business that I think anybody could pursue if they're interested. I'm Larry Cornett, and this is Invincible Solopreneurs. So I wanted to welcome Nate Davis to the show. Nate and I are old friends, have known each other for many years, actually. He's a local friend, which is very rare these days. And we met through CrossFit, and our families have attended the same gym and gone to all kinds of events together. But I thought it'd be great to have Nate on the show. So welcome to the show, Nate.
Hey, thanks for having me, Larry. Really appreciate your time.
So let's start off with telling the listeners a little bit more about who you are and what you do.
Okay, so my name's Nate Davis, obviously. I am an active realtor in our community. I do real estate coaching. I'm in the middle of developing a mastermind program for investors that want to learn how to flip houses and wholesale houses.
That's cool.
I think that's actually the best part about what I do. But I'm kind of just your everything real estate guy at this point.
Love it. So I've often talked with folks, and I work with folks who've done one or more kind of career pivots. Like I work with one guy, it's kind of his brand. He talks a little bit about it, that he used to be doing blue collar work like construction, and then he went into teaching, then he went into insurance, and then pivoted into tech and became a designer. And so he's a software designer now. And he talks about the power of that. And you're a career pivoter too. So you didn't start like coming straight out of school and into real estate. You were doing some other stuff and kind of found your way into that. So what made you wake up one day and say, you know what, I need to make a change in my life and go into something that I think is going to be more lucrative for my future?
Yeah. So, obviously out of high school, based on the town that I live in, a lot of people either are going to go to a junior college or, go on and work blue collar work. They're going to be a construction worker.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to just kind of follow in the status quo. And I was one of them. I started going to a JC, was working as a roofer for a very short period of time. And then I got a job at a grocery store and quickly moved my way up into a management role. And, in that management role, my goals was always to, really work my way up the ranks. I wanted to, become a VP or, something up there with the badge that says so. This means I'm important. It got to the point where I'm teaching financials classes down at the district office, and I'm going on special projects, and that was great until I kind of was looking around at the lifestyle that everybody had that was in the roles that I wanted to be in, or even, at the roles of, my direct supervisor, which would have been my next step. And I was like, I don't think that this is conducive to the life that I want to live. I have split days off. I don't get to choose when I have a day off. I'm constantly working longer hours than anticipated. My social life is diminishing. My value to the company, it was really evident, was pretty low at certain times when you're not hitting these performance, based incentives or whatever the case may be. And so I actually had bought my first house at 21 years old. And during the process of buying my first house, I was like, hey, if this guy can be a realtor and he can do this job, I think I could do this. He was bragging about all this money that he was making and all this stuff. And I'm like, this guy does nothing. Like, what? I find a house on Zillow and I could do this for sure. And I had had some family friends growing up that were in the mortgage industry, but I knew that I didn't want to do that because I am not somebody that's going to sit in an office all day. Right. So when I was kind of analyzing, okay, if I want to get into real estate, there's a lot of different things to do in real estate. Like, do I want to be a mortgage broker? Do I want to be an appraiser? Do I want to, be a realtor? and that's the path that I ultimately chose. So I kind of pivoted, started getting my real estate license during, my employment still with the company that I was with. And,
Smart,
and
smart.
then, kind of pivoted and went from there. It was kind of jumping in with the blocks on my feet in the deep end,
Sure.
but
Yeah. Yeah.
it, it has proven to be, an acceptable pivot
Yes.
at that point in my life, so.
Yeah. Yeah, for folks who don't know, Nate is one of the top agents in the county. I mean, he's really good at what he does, and people know his name. Um, you did something that's smart. A couple of things that are really smart that I recommend, and a lot of people don't do, which is one, you looked up the ladder and you took a look at the lives of the people that you were pursuing.
Yeah.
That next step up the ladder, and you're like, wait a second, this doesn't look like what I want my life to be.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people don't do that. They just kind of climb and they say, got to get next, got to get next. And it's like, take a hard look at those people and say, is that where I want to end up?
Yeah.
And that's the first thing you did. I think that's fantastic. The other is getting your license and getting the education and training while you had a job. So that's important. And I talk with people about this, like, plan your next move while you're employed so you don't
Hmm.
feel desperate. You're
Yeah.
not panicking going, oh no, I'm running out of money and my bank account's dropping and
Yeah.
I need to just take whatever I can take. You had time to think about it and
Yeah.
plan and do all that. So you are really good at what you do. What do you think makes you stand apart from the other agents out there, and what makes you do so well? I mean, you really have done well.
I think honestly, the foundational piece to my success is just the fact that I'm gonna work hard for you and I'm gonna be honest, right? I think those
Yeah.
are two foundational pieces in a lot of things
Mhm.
in life, but definitely like in my
Sure.
business, especially in the beginning. People know that I am new at my career. I don't have a lot of experience under my belt, but I'm going to tell you the truth, and I'm going to tell you if I don't know the answer. And I'm going to go find it, and I'm going to work hard for you. I'm going to treat you ethically, and I'm just going to be forthcoming with all the information. And if I need to, I'm gonna go off and get the answer. So I think foundationally that
Right.
was kind of what helped me in the beginning, and
Mhm.
then just as my career has evolved, my ability to kind of lean on others and leverage relationships, I think is a super undervalued part of our career and
Right.
in our industry. A lot of people look at other agents as kind of their rivals or somebody that they
Mhm.
don't want to
Yeah.
work with. And I've learned over the years that the more relationships I can have, the better it's going to be for my career and for my client's success, whether
Mhm.
buying or selling a house, right? Um, and that also
Right.
goes for like my relationship with the vendors or my escrow officer, my mortgage lender. Just really getting out there
Right.
and developing those relationships and solidifying myself as kind of the expert in the area with the connections to get the job done. And my career has just kind of grown exponentially over time because I've kind of leaned in on those core values, honestly.
Right. Right. Yeah. That is, I mean, I've bought and sold houses back in the Bay Area, where we lived before we moved up here. And it's funny, like you said, the honesty is so important. That's why we finally went with who we went with when we bought our house there. The other folks, they're like, "Well, this house is great for you. And this house is great for you. Every house was great for us." Like, no, it's not. It doesn't match what we said we wanted.
Yeah.
Whereas the other lady who we ended up with, she would look at something. She goes, and we would just drive away fast. She'd come up and she goes, "No." She'd say, "This isn't. I'm not going to
Yeah.
waste your time. This isn't
Yeah.
right for you." And I love that because the other agents were taking us through every property. I'm like, "Why are we in this house? This isn't even close to what we were looking for."
Hmm.
Right. And then the one we end up going with when we sold, very similar to you, that she had deep roots in the community. She really knew the community well. And she had an entire notebook, her address book full of contractors and experts and consultants that could help.
Yeah.
So when we needed stuff done to kind of get the house ready to sell, she was like, I got a guy, I got a couple
Yeah.
of people. Super. I mean, the price was amazing, the quality was amazing. And
Yeah.
I just got like, hey man, take care of it. She was amazing. She's set and forget, right? And it turned
Yeah.
out really well, and we got a good deal selling our house. it is about those relationships. I absolutely think so.
I think that, when you're a realtor, you might have somebody that comes in behind you, especially like on a listing appointment, for example.
Hmm.
And they may do it cheaper, right? And that's a given, right? Just like any industry,
Sure.
coaching or, at the gym or whatever the case may be. And I
Right.
often,
Yeah.
oftentimes tell my, potential clients like, hey, look, like somebody might do this cheaper, but my value is in my knowledge, my experience, my ability to negotiate, and what I bring to the table with you just having a full concierge service, like from
Right.
start to
Yeah.
finish. I'm going to take care of you, whatever you need. I've got vendors for staging, for, repairs, for inspections, whatever the case may be, movers,
Right. Yeah.
and then just going back to everything else, my ability to be ethical and, leverage my relationships to potentially even get, you know, exceed your expectation on price, etc. So
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's so good. That's so good. So, what do you think? Because you've been doing this for a while, and I'm sure you've heard all kinds of stuff. What do
yeah.
you think are some of the common misconceptions about real estate and the real estate industry and the process and stuff you've run into?
In general, there's a lot. I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think, from client's perspective, looking at, a realtor's job, right? A lot of people just think a realtor is a person that opens doors, right? And
Right. Right. You
you
got the
really,
lockbox.
you really you just hold the key, so to speak. But in reality, if you're a good realtor, you're a market expert, and the neighborhoods,
Right.
and
Yeah.
statistics and school districts, and all the different things.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's one of the most common misconceptions. And then kind of pairing off of that, people think that we're overpaid, right? Because all we do is
Right.
open a
Right.
door.
Open the
So
door.
I think that's, I mean, that my opinion, we're not overpaid, but we some some people are. But I think,
Yeah.
in addition to that, like from a buyer's perspective, again, like one of the misconceptions is you gotta put 25% down or 20% down on a house, and you have to have this big savings account, and you have to have
Mm-hmm.
this 750 credit score, and you have to find your ideal house for your first house, and all of those things
Sure.
are
Sure.
kind of traditionally a thought process that we all were kind of fed growing up, as the American dream. Um, but what I
Right.
try to
Right.
coach a lot of my first time buyers, even step up buyers, is like, hey, look, like there are loan programs out there for down payment assistance. There are ways to get the seller to pay for your closing costs. There are ways to minimize the amount of money that comes
Mm-hmm.
out of your pocket to get into this house, and buy the rate down, or whatever it could be, to be able to help you afford it without having to save up hundreds of thousands of dollars, which is unrealistic in a lot of
Right.
people's lives
Right.
based on lifestyle, income, inflation, whatever economics cycle you're in at the time. So I think for a home buyer, that's really a big thing, that we have to educate them,
Sure.
because that's a huge misconception. And then on the flip side, a lot of sellers tend to try to think that they know how to be the realtor and negotiate the price before you even set the price, because the
Mm.
buyers are going to come in and they're going to lowball me, or whatever. So you really
Right.
just have
Right.
to educate them on the process and how it really is going to flow.
Right. So, what do you think? I mean, this can be all kinds of stuff, but what do you think are some of the most important lessons you've personally learned along your journey? So, not even just real estate, but your kind of your life journey, your career journey that have helped you get into a better place over the years where you feel like, you know what, I'm happy with where my life is and I'm happy with where I'm going versus some other folks that, we both know that things haven't turned out so well.
Yeah. Honestly, my personal biggest one is the people that you're around. The people that I've surrounded
Yeah,
myself with, has taught me more about myself, and it's put me in other environments to really put my mindset at the right spot. Whether my mindset needs to be in a state of relaxation and recovery,
sure.
from work or whatever, or if I'm around, my closest 3-4 people that are inspiring me to push myself to continue to
Hmm.
rise to another level. I mean, that is one of the biggest things and biggest takeaways I've had probably over the last, you know, definitely over the last 4.5, almost 5 years since, I pivoted my life
Right.
again, right.
Sure.
When
Yeah.
I kind of looked around and said, hey, I'm a top agent. I'm just not going where I want to be based on the people that I'm surrounding myself with. And I
Sure.
think that,
Yeah.
that's one of the biggest life lessons I've had is just who I've surrounded myself with that are inspiring me to be a better me.
Yeah. Yeah. James Altucher talks about that as your scene. He's like, and he talks about some of the greats, like music artists, writers, you name it, people in business. And he's like, you got to pay attention to who's in their scene, their circle of friends, and who's in your scene. Because, like you said, either that's going to lift you up or it's going to pull you down.
Yeah.
And it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to sever those ties, uh, or maybe not necessarily sever, but kind of pull back a little
Hmm.
from the friendships that you're like, is this really helping me be my best self?
Yeah.
Um, it's painful. It's part of growing up. And I think there's a difference between people who grow up and mature. And like you said, every 5 to 10 years, they're pivoting and pivoting. They're kind of saying, I'm a new person now. And I see who I want to be. And I'm learning as I
Hmm.
go
Yeah.
and things I need to change in my daily routine in ways I take care of myself and my family. And the folks who don't seem to do that.
Yeah.
So it's one of the most important things is who's around you. It really is.
I can say that I can look at different periods in my life and know how my surroundings were just based on I can literally look at my bank account to be completely honest, and I can look at like a past
Sure.
bank
Yeah.
statement, you know, and maybe this doesn't resonate with everybody, but like I can based on the people I was hanging out with and the things I was doing, I could look at a bank statement and see the transition in my life, like just looking
Right.
back,
Yeah.
and I'm
It's
not
true.
talking about the bank balance. I'm looking at the transactions. I'm looking at who I was and what I was
The
doing.
way you're spending money. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. The reckless behavior, the reckless spending, and then kind of honing in and pivoting and becoming more aware and more business minded, and then growing in real estate, kind of circling back to that, starting to invest more in real estate myself instead of I
Right.
was already a
Yeah.
homeowner, right, but then practicing more of what I was preaching and teaching people, and instead of always telling people what to do and what decisions to make, really listening to some of my own advice and growing a portfolio, and
Yeah.
starting to flip houses and learn creative finance, and kind of break off from the status quo of what I was telling people is not reality. Well, I mean, I've bought houses without ever using a bank and then
Mhm.
without using $1 of my own money, so I
Right.
frequently do
Yeah.
that, actually. So learning those processes and pivoting and seeing my trajectory go up over time, for sure.
Yeah. No, that kind of brings up my next question is how do you keep learning and growing? So, and you've expanded the way you're doing business and
Mhm.
investing, and you've looked at ways to scale yourself. Because I think we all know that trying to sell our time for money only goes so far, right?
Yeah.
And it is get to a different point of how do I make deals where it's not just me, my money, that
Mhm.
it's other money, it's investors and things like that. So what do you do to keep fresh and keep learning and keep growing to advance yourself?
I've kind of identified a few people like on social media that I want to follow. I don't follow
Mm-hmm.
and actually watch a lot of people. Like I have a lot of people that I follow,
Sure.
right? But I've really honed in on kind of like a core of 5 or 6 people that I really, kind of,
Okay.
want to model after. And
Yeah.
and I've learned from their content and learned from the books that they write. I think Rich Dad Poor Dad was a book that really started to change, my mindset and the way that I view kind of money and
Mm-hmm.
life and real estate. And following people that are speakers like Ed Milet, who kind of help me, look internally and grow,
Mm-hmm.
from a spiritual standpoint, and beyond. People like Grant Cardone that have been in
Sure. Yeah.
in positions that I've personally been in, with his rehab and, getting out of rehab and kind of growing,
Mm-hmm.
whether you agree with his philosophies or whatever. He has done great things in the real estate sector,
Sure.
post,
Yes.
kind of being down at rock bottom and then figuring it out.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
learning from those types of people and learning, hey, these guys are doing great things, and they're
Right.
doing it
Right.
non-traditional ways. And so really just continuing to identify, okay, hey, that guy's doing it. How is he doing that? I'm going to watch YouTube videos, or I'm going
Yeah.
to, read a book, or who are they listening to? I want to go listen to that podcast, because
Right.
that
Yeah.
podcast is going to, open my brain up. And instead of just spending my dead time in a car, listening to music,
Mm-hmm.
finding somebody that is talking about something that I want to learn about, and then from there it expands. I'm
Right.
inquisitive naturally, and so I see this guy named Pace Morby on Instagram, and this guy's buying houses without ever taking a loan or a credit check. And how's he doing it?
Yeah. How's he
Like,
doing
I
that?
want to figure that out. So I just
Right.
continue to
Yeah.
push myself in that regard by kind of using the people that are influential on social media, and it's free. YouTube is free.
Yeah.
People
That's
have these
right.
excuses that they don't have the money to learn. There are billions of free videos out there in today's
Yes.
technology world. There's zero reason not to continue to grow, in my opinion. you know and
Yeah.
and asking questions, people even locally, that I know that are, successful, and maybe they, had a different way of doing it in the past.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to know, because, could I take
Right.
what their knowledge is from the past and apply it to today's world, and then use what I know to, propel
Mm.
forward.
That's a good point, because I think there is a lot of foundational stuff that still holds true and works
Of
well.
course. Yeah.
Some old school sales folks, it's like that's just human nature and psychology. And now we're trying to do it online, but it's
Yeah.
still humans, right?
Yeah.
It's humans
Yeah.
talking to humans.
Absolutely.
No, you made a good point. I think a lot of people kind of use social media to entertain and turn their brain off, and YouTube and everything, right? It's recreational, and there's some amount of recreational entertainment that's I think is okay. But I think people miss the opportunity of social media being an educational resource,
Yeah.
and YouTube being an educational resource. And like you said, it's like there are so many free resources that there's no reason to not continue your education. I talk about this with people I coach, where sometimes much younger folks will reach out and they're like, I can't really afford coaching. I'm like, I've got 6 years of content I've written that's
Right.
free.
Yeah.
Go read it. Like how to write your resume, how to do a good job interview. It's like, go read it. It's totally free. All it takes is your time.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. I encounter
That
that
is
too,
it.
because, I kind of pivoted from being just a realtor to now I'm a realtor, and I'm kind of flipping houses every so often. And then the market got so hot after COVID that, like, I had no time to do
Yeah.
anything but be a realtor. Like, I was,
Sure.
selling 50,
It
60
was
houses
hot.
a year.
Yeah.
Like, I was so busy, I couldn't do anything else.
Yeah.
And then as the market has kind of transitioned again a little bit, I've been able to, kind of pivot again, and I'm still, performing and
Right.
still selling houses, but it's given me the ability to kind of grow in other ways. And, kind of circling to your point, I've began kind of coaching people, right, and coaching them on
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
to be a good realtor, or how to, identify investment opportunities, and be a good, real estate investor. And you can tell the people that are serious, and the people that
Sure.
are just kind of, want the free stuff,
Right.
because
Yeah.
I've spent, and as have you, many hours kind of honing in on my craft. So
Sure.
if you want me, you got to pay for me. Otherwise, you can go get my free stuff. you know.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's such a good point. And a lot of folks who listen to this are entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, or want to be business
Mhm.
owners.
Yeah.
And you've pointed out something that I've talked about a lot is like, don't have a single income stream, which makes you so vulnerable and fragile. Because, like you said, the market could be super hot and you're just so busy doing real estate, you can't do anything else. And then
Yeah.
there's times it cools off. And it's like, now what? And I know
Yeah.
people who get in that situation are like, oh, I'm not making as much money this year.
Hmm.
Well, it doesn't get as scary if you have other income streams. So if you're
Yeah.
doing coaching, which I think I talk about this, anybody who's been successful in their primary career can easily be a coach because
Hmm.
there's so many folks that you could reach back and say, let me show you what I've learned, the lessons I've learned, the mistakes I made that you don't have to make.
Yeah.
All that's coaching basically.
Yeah.
And the investment properties and all that kind of stuff. So important to have multiple revenue streams as an entrepreneur or solopreneur. It's really, you got to diversify like anything.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I can tell, when everything's constricting, and if you
Yeah,
I've had that one revenue stream, right? And it's like, I don't have a deal closing this month. Like, okay,
sure.
I
Yeah.
have enough money to
Now what?
get through, but what if this happens again and again, right?
That's right.
You know,
Yeah.
if somebody's, just starting out and they're trying to build a business, obviously that's going to be very difficult, if that's
Right.
the
Right.
only source of money that you have coming in. And I have friends who, are business owners and entrepreneurs that have, that have succeeded and failed, and that
Sure.
failure is always part of it. I always say I'm failing forward when I fail, because not everything that I've done has had success, right? I take
Sure.
everything as a
Yeah.
lesson, and things happen for me, not to me, right? But having multiple revenue streams gives you that kind of breath, and kind of, you
Yeah.
can, let your shoulders down and be like, okay, I don't have to stress, and I can be more productive, and I can, you know, be
Hmm.
a better version, more clear, thought of mind or train of thought, when I'm, not worried if I'm going to have money to pay my
That's
mortgage this
right.
month.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't go into fight or flight mode, right? We're humans and we're animals. And so when we're feeling desperate and things aren't so good, we don't make good decisions,
Right.
you know?
Right.
And that's the truth is you got to be in a place of kind of calm and knowing you're going to be okay to make better decisions and to
Mhm.
plan. And that's a good way to do it is to diversify. Um, so one thing I've noticed is over the last year or 2 years, you've really amped up your social media marketing,
Yeah.
and you've invested a lot in it. Can you talk a little bit more about that decision and what that's been like and how that's helped you with your business and what you do?
Yeah. So it was super awkward at first.
Sure,
Very,
yeah, it is.
it's not something that's comfortable for most people, and it's
Yeah,
unnatural,
yeah,
and it was just like, most of us don't want to be vulnerable and feel stupid, right?
right.
And it
Yeah,
really
yeah,
did. And even still, I
yeah.
still, grab my phone and I'm looking at it and I'm talking to it and I still feel stupid, right? But it's fine. It is what it is, but I've really noticed that, as I've been able to grow, with, my comfort in staring into a camera and talking into a camera,
Right, right.
um,
Yeah.
I've been able to connect with a lot more people, right? I think for me,
Yes,
my
yeah.
reach has started to grow exponentially because of that, right? I'm not only talking to people that I'm meeting in person, or maybe, two pieces removed, or however that
Right,
statement
right.
go. I'm speaking to the masses. I'm talking to people across the world,
Mhm.
and I'm able to get my message out. Whether it be about real estate, sales or transacting as an agent, or real
Right,
estate
right.
investing, or whatever the case may be. And I've been able to develop some great relationships with people that then take my content and reach out to me, and they have questions, and I'm
Mhm.
I'm like, oh wow, so what I said is valuable. Like, it actually does add
Yeah,
value to
exactly.
my
Yeah.
whole goal is to add to value to somebody's life, right? Um, and
Right,
through the
right.
social media growth I've had, I've made significant money, just because people see what I'm doing and they're like, hey, I want to work with this guy, or hey, I have,
Right.
an
Yeah.
issue that he can solve, right? Whether it be a house
Mhm.
that they need to get rid of. So I've been able to touch, different sectors that otherwise I wouldn't have been able to. And it's not
Right.
always easy. Coming up with content ideas is not, something that always
Yes.
flows easy. It's like, okay, what am I going to film
Right.
today? But doing things naturally, like I have an assistant who is, there, and he's able to film me while I'm out in, the field doing things, right? Um,
Yeah,
and
that stuff's cool. Very
yeah,
cool.
and it gives people a perspective that they otherwise typically aren't going to get, right? And that helps the
Mhm.
engagement. And I think social media is super underrated. I watched somebody like Gary Vee, and he talks about that, right? Like, it is literally
Yeah.
free. You get on there
I know.
for free, and you can talk to millions of people. Like,
Yeah.
where else can you tell the world who you are, what you
Yeah.
do, and all the information about yourself, for free. I mean, you
Right.
can't do it on TV, you
That's
can't do
right.
it on radio, you can't do it anywhere, So
No, it would
I've
cost you
just,
millions. It would.
yeah, I've had to
Yeah.
get into that mindset. Like, okay, if I want to get where I want to be, whether it be, monetarily, or the amount of lives I want to touch, or if I want to speak on stage to, thousands of people, like, I have to do this because it's not going away and it's
Right.
going to
Yeah.
exponentially help me grow, So
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
think for anybody out there that's considering that, you just got to do it. It's
Just
either
do
one
it.
day or day
Yeah.
one. Just
Yeah.
grab your damn phone and film yourself.
Hmm. Yes. Yeah. And it is, I think the thing that I've learned to make peace with over the years doing this is being human and being vulnerable is what people want to see.
Hmm.
They can get polished TV on Netflix and Hulu and all that kind of stuff. Like, go
Yeah.
watch the polished stuff. But
Yeah.
for those of us that are just human beings in the world and putting stuff on social media, they want to see you being vulnerable. They want to
Yeah.
see the mistakes,
Yeah.
and that's
Absolutely.
hard initially. And it's like you talked about looking stupid, but it's like, you know what? People are very forgiving and they'd rather see somebody be human and make mistakes.
Right. Right. I
It's
think
very
it helps
approachable.
them. It helps them relate to you.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was getting.
Totally.
It's funny. I was getting a massage like 2 weeks ago, and the person giving me a massage, I've known her, through a couple people over the years, but
Yeah.
not like directly, And she was like, "Man, I love watching your social media." I'm like,
You're like,
I'm
what?
like, this is a little awkward. I'm laying here naked on your table. She's like, I learned so much, and this is so great.
That's
And I'm like,
cool.
hey, it
Wow.
is cool. And then I was at the state capitol on a field trip. I was chaperoning for my daughter, and somebody walked up to me at the state capitol. No idea who they were, and they were like, "You're Nate Davis," and I was like, "Yes, I'm Nate Davis." And
Oh,
they were like,
wow.
"I follow you on Instagram." And I was like,
Isn't that crazy?
that's
Yeah.
weird. you know because I'm not used to that, but it just kind of shows you, okay, once I get that into my head, or get out of my own head, what kind of an impact you can have on people. You can literally change people's lives. you know
Yeah. It's weird. I've only had that happen, like, I'm not as famous as Nate. I had it happen once where I went somewhere and somebody came up and they said, "Oh," I think I was getting a coffee locally here, and they said, "Oh, I saw your video last week about the place you stayed, over in Nevada City." I was like, "What?" You're like, "Oh, yeah, I watch your Instagram." I was like, "Oh, man, this is weird." It's like, who
yeah,
knew
yeah,
that people are watching, people are paying attention, but
100%.
yeah, it's crazy. It is crazy. Um, let's get to the end here and kind of wrap up. But what advice would you give someone who's just starting down the path, whether it's to become an agent or to become an investor in real estate, or even just to kind of be more of an entrepreneur like you've become? But what advice would you give a young person just started down this path?
I think the one thing that I wish I would have done sooner, and I wish
Mm.
advice somebody would have given me, was find a good mentor. I think
Oh,
that's
yeah.
just such an underrated part of all of this. And they don't even
Sure.
necessarily have to be in your field. It could be, somebody to help your thought process, or somebody that's
Yeah.
just a life mentor. But like, I know in real estate, like I kind of said earlier, a lot of people look at somebody that's in the industry as kind of their foe, whereas you can really rely on them to help you through the bumpy times,
Mm.
or kind of help you problem solve. And that, I think that goes for life. I've had life
Yeah.
mentors from the time I was out of high school all the way up, and through to still to this day. And I still have people that I rely on, and I have a close circle of friends that I can call, when I need some advice, whether
Yeah.
it's advice on my real estate transactions, or whatever, or life, right, as a parent or a husband or a
Sure.
friend, whatever. So I mean, my number one piece of advice for anybody, whether you're an entrepreneur, solopreneur, getting into real estate, if you're a real estate investor, find a good mentor, somebody that
Mm.
can help you along, somebody that can be your cheerleader in the good times and the bad. um,
Yeah.
because I think a lot of people, they find themselves surrounded by people when times are good, right?
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and then when they're kind of going through the thick of it, if you look around and you don't have anybody in your corner, like,
Right.
it's going to be a lot harder. So
Yeah. I agree.
in my opinion, a coach, a mentor, whatever it may be, right? I
Right.
think that
Yeah.
that's something that can really, you can look at kind of something to pinpoint on, like, okay, what is one of the items that helps me most in my life and my career, and I think that would be it for sure.
I love that. No, that's fantastic. So where can people learn more about you, follow you? Where would you like people to come and follow and discover you?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram. Is probably the main spot at the.nate.davis. You can
Nice.
Google me, Nate Davis Realtor. I'll be up there. My Facebook will show up, but I'm most active on Instagram. My
Okay.
YouTube is, still a work in progress, but I am on YouTube with some stuff as well, and TikTok.
Cool.
I believe if you post some links down below, but yeah, the
I
Nate Davis.
will. Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic. Great. Yeah. I'll share some links for the audience. If you want to check out the show notes, you can go find Nate, learn more, follow him, and see some of the good stuff that he shares. He shares some really good stuff. Well, thanks for being on the show, Nate. We've been talking about this for years, but we finally got around to doing it.
First time.
Yes.
I can't wait. Next time we're going to do it in person. Next time we'll.
Yes. We'll go do a real studio setup and do something really fun, but that would be cool.
I'd love that. Thank you for your time, Larry. I really appreciate it.
Until next time, I wish you the best of luck with building the business of your dreams.